Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the January 20th, 2023 Board of Selectmen's meeting. Following guidance issued by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in 2020 regarding open meeting law, this public meeting is being held remotely, and individuals wishing to participate can do so utilizing the Zoom video conferencing technology, which was provided in the agenda to this meeting. Before we begin with our agenda, I'd like to take a roll call of the Board of Selectmen. Robin Hunter, present.
Bob Springett, present.
John Jeffries, I'm here with all my friends.
The first item of business is public comment. Are there any public comments? All right, well, I will take that as a no. I will take the silence as a no. And we will move directly to item 1.1, and that is a discussion regarding the MBTA Community Action Plan and a potential vote regarding this matter. I believe this is the second time that we have discussed this with the Planning Board, and we have the chair of the Planning Board, Carol Lisbon, with us today on video, who will make the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, this is the second step of basically a three-step process that the state has imposed upon MBTA communities, which we are because we're adjacent to towns that actually have MBTA stations. And the first step was done back last year. And this next step is basically a very simple one, is to fill out a form, which you have in your packet, I hope, which basically explains where we are and what our plan is. Just to remind everybody, the hard work comes up over the next 2 years by law by December 31st of 2025, calendar year 25. The town will have to designate 102, about 7 acres, which translates to about 102 houses when you use the density that they require, 15 units per acre, in order for us to continue to receive funds from MassWorks and a couple of other grant programs. So Planning Board's assuming that the Board of Selectmen wants to continue to get those funds and apply for those grants. So over the next 2 years, we're going to have to work together to identify some acreage that could possibly handle that kind of zoning density. But at this point, we don't have to. The state actually gives us free consulting to help us in that process. So once we're done with this step and this application has been approved, then maybe when we actually get a full-time town planner, we can start working with a consultant to address the next hardest step, which is to identify the zoning. So we've had differences of opinion between town council, those that have attended various seminars and so forth, on exactly who has to sign this form and what detail it has to be provided with. Gino Carlucci, if you remember, our town planner for quite some time, his son actually works for the state in the department that is administering this program. And he has sent us an email assuring us that we do not have to, at this point, identify any specific properties that we're thinking about rezoning. And I have discussed this with Nina Pickering Cook, and she's fine with that information. So we're just asking that you take a look at it. In fact, we just found out through an email yesterday as well that we don't require both the Planning Board and a Board of Selectmen approval. I can just sign the application. So that I don't really care who signs it, but we should decide that as well after hopefully you've approved the document that Laura Harbottle, our interim town planner, has put in front of you.
Well, Carol, I appreciate the update. I remember the conversation we had in March, which was almost a year ago, about how the state is trying to make this program one size fits all, and it doesn't really. And hopefully in the next 2 years, as we try and designate our zoning, the state will recognize that maybe there needs to be some variation, and common sense will prevail. But for now, we're not in a position to make a decision not to get those funds because they're important to us. And this is such a new program, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I think the state is still, or the Commonwealth is still working out some of the kinks, so to say, with what they're trying to achieve and how the documentation for administration is worded, or they intend to implement it.
Very well said. There was such pushback from the smaller towns like Dover when this first came out that they did in fact change a bunch of stuff, but we still are left with the broad brush approach. Just to put it in context, the Red Robin development on 109 that's been approved, okay, is 14.5 units per acre. Just to give you a sense of what 15 units per acre means. It's an incredible density for a town that has no infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's not unique to the town of Dover. I mean, there are other towns just in the same position as us.
Yeah, it would be nice if we could get ourselves undesignated.
Right. And us and a whole lot of other towns.
Yes.
So we need to spend the next 2 years, working with our representatives and trying to see if we can get the Commonwealth to take a more pragmatic approach to this.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
And if push comes to shove, at some point you have to make a determination. Can we do without these funds or not? So, I really appreciate the efforts of the planning board and the town planner, Laura, the interim town planner, and agree wholeheartedly that we need to put our heads together, because 2 years will be gone before you know it.
Right.
On how to get to where we need to be, some middle ground. Bob, do you have any comments?
I think this is something I voted against a year ago on principle. So I intend to vote against this again on principle.
Tell that to the taxpayers.
Tell what to the taxpayers?
You're by voting against it, you are basically saying that you are willing to forego hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on principle. Knowing
Well, I'll tell you what, Carol,
Yep.
these sorts of programs offers a carrot, and the carrot is invariably money. And what you're telling me is Dover's core values are conservation and preservation. Dover's core values do not, when you build high density communities, you are attacking the environment. So these programs that are sort of maybe well intended or not, certainly not well thought about, directly conflict with people who are trying to actually reduce climate change, reduce pollution, reduce all of the environmental efforts. So I think going along and pretending that we support this rather than actually challenge it vigorously with other communities is simply the wrong approach. So you probably have 2 votes, and apparently don't even need 2 votes, but I'm not going to be party to this.
Okay.
I don't even know if you could see.
Yes,
I
we
mean, you're
can.
so small.
The high ceiling.
Robin, thank you. Carol, so to Bob's points, and I agree with all of Bob's points, because the MBTA Act was intended for communities that the MBTA services. We're not one of them. The whole idea behind the act, Carol, is from a planning standpoint, and I don't mean to be telling you this like I'm lecturing you on that. I don't mean that at all. I know that you know what it is. I'm saying this rhetorically, that its intent is for communities along the MBTA to build high-density housing to help the housing issue that the Commonwealth currently doesn't have, specifically low income, moderate income, however it is you categorize it. But the whole idea that the genesis of this is for the communities along the MBTA. The theory is that those communities are getting the value of the MBTA. They should partake in the housing requirements that this is setting out. That's not us. We're not part of that. There's no way that we're ever going to be a community on the MBTA. Do you agree with that, Carol?
I do. And I totally understand where Bob's coming from. And in a theoretical way, I would totally support everything that the two of you had said. Okay. From a process and leadership standpoint, at this point in time, the decision can be made right now, okay, not to submit this by the selectmen. We may choose to do it anyway from the planning board standpoint.
Yeah.
You can make that choice. Understand that you will be explaining to the citizens of Dover how what I understand is an extremely difficult budget situation will get even worse. And if you read the fine print of the MBTA Communities Act, you will note that it's not clear that the zoning that one has to do, the identified area that would be zoned for this type of density, will ever be built. So there's also, quite frankly, a theoretical aspect to this Communities Act relative to small towns like Dover. There are very specific areas that we can include in zoning. We can include conservation restrictions and protected land and wetlands, for instance. But given the lack of infrastructure in this town, we could designate property, or we could designate a district, okay, knowing that will never be built because of the practical aspects of a development of this size. So before you start voting against it, I think we need to think in terms of the reality of it. We've also been living this now for a year and a half. And if the town felt this way, then there should have been works already undertaken to start the process, if there is one, I have no idea, okay, of working with Beacon Hill to change the designation. And I'm not sure that anything's been done with that. Meanwhile, today is what is today? The 20th, and we have 11 days to decide whether we're going to meet this deadline.
How much money have we received?
From what?
From the MBTA Act? Like what
I have no idea. It's DPW and capital budget stuff. You tell me. I have no idea.
There's been some, I think there's a couple of grants that we've gotten for some recent work, but I was not able to actually get a sense. It's certainly not millions of dollars.
Right, but
Some
But you're going to
targeted
be,
grants.
but are you not going to be putting in grants for Claybrook Road, for the Center Street?
Oh, there's a grant
Willow
in,
Street Culvert? I mean,
there are already grants in for all of that. You know, I think it's very unproductive pointing fingers right now at one another and who's to blame. The issue is in 2 years, when we have more information and this is better established, if you decide to pull out of the program, you can. But why put the town in jeopardy of not being able to get these grants when this is a very new program? Nobody's really sure how it's going to roll out. It just keeps all our options open. We have 2 years to designate these areas, 2 years to work with the Commonwealth to determine, you know, whether or not we can actually make this work for Dover.
There is sort of a funny part, Robin. I mean, we're asked to do a fair amount of work on stuff that we don't believe in or don't even think we qualified for. So I think, I mean, to me, continuing to pretend that this is something worthwhile to do for 30 gold.
All right, so Bob, we already heard your position.
Okay,
So
thank you.
we understand. So
Right. What
the
I'm trying to
question
get
is,
to, Robin, is what I agree with what you said. If there's no consequences, what are the consequences of both? What Bob is saying is we have to put time, energy, effort into understanding what this is and understanding what we're obligated for. I'm the key word for me, Carol, is what are we obligating ourselves to?
Robin couldn't have said it any better. This is a process. Okay. If we do not meet the January 31st deadline for the submission of this form,
Yeah.
which if you look at the form is, talk about basic content and why even bother submitting
It
it.
says
You can make that
nothing.
case. It says nothing. Okay. What it gives you, and assume it's accepted by the state, which we're led to believe it will be, it gives you another year or two to work on the issue, make a decision, as Robin so beautifully said, okay? And it gives you access in calendar year 2023 to these grant funds. If the January 31st submission is either not submitted or rejected and not revised to get acceptance, okay, then the town of Dover cannot apply for those types of grants to handle the millions of dollars of infrastructure that's been identified that needs to be fixed in Dover.
Got it. And that
We don't have to decide on a zoning thing until a town meeting in 2025.
so
Right, and it's
during
not for
which
us to decide, it's for the citizens of Dover to decide.
Exactly, during which time the state will be providing us with free consulting services to help us in the process. So I don't see if there's any downside at all.
during the process that you just described, once we start down the path, are we, and we do start down the path, are we obligated in any way if we pull out?
No, there are no different obligations than when you approved this back last year.
Yeah.
There's absolutely, other than the philosophical, there's absolutely no downside to submitting this form.
Well,
And we actually have a grant for $1 million for Claybrook Road, which I believe falls under this program that we're waiting to hear on.
So, Robin, I think the $1 million for Claybrook came from another state fund, and that was in conjunction with.
John, we do not have the $1 million yet. The $1 million grant will only be approved after town meeting. We have the $2 million grant.
We asked for Claybrook Road, Willow Street behind Carol's house, and we asked for the bridge, the Central Street Bridge. So those three projects were not part of the MBTA.
John, I don't know for a fact. All I can tell you is the $2 million for the Center Street Bridge has been approved.
Yeah,
from capital budgets that the $1 million for Claybrook Road will only get approved after town meeting, and that's why it's a placeholder in the capital budget request.
I understand that. I'm trying to link them to what.
Well, I'm not sure what the sources are. I'm not sure that you're sure what the sources are.
Correct.
So maybe we could go back and find out what the sources are for those.
That's my point. But Robin, that is exactly the point. I don't want to paint us into a corner to not get it. I want to get the money, but I don't want to obligate us for something that we may have to participate in that we don't want to.
Let me say this once again, folks.
Right.
Because the planning board has spent time on this. There is no further obligation. We approve this, we submit it, the state approves it. We then have until December 31st of 2025 to decide what we want to do with this. It could be nothing. We're willing to forego future grants. Town meeting decides. We could define some areas that maybe meet the needs of 40B housing or not, which we still have as an obligation for a housing production plan. These things aren't done in a vacuum. Okay. These are related issues that we as leaders of the town, from a selectman standpoint and a planning board standpoint, since we don't have a housing authority or a housing board, need to consider over the next 2 years or so. This does not change anything over what you guys approved in March of 2021.
Other than move the process forward. Right.
Exactly. Doesn't change anything. If you voted for it in March of 2021,
Right.
okay, then you should vote for it now. And what the town decides to do by December 31st of 2025 will be discussed over the next 2 years. But this doesn't change that process at all, other than allowing you to go forward and allowing you to apply for grants. And I can't tell you, since I'm not involved in the grant applications, whether all these grants that you've applied for from a DPW standpoint, infrastructure standpoint, which ones of those fall under the various grant programs that are addressed by this MBTA Communities Act. I would imagine a call to the state by those who have submitted the grants will answer that question. And that's important information to get, absolutely.
Right.
But it doesn't change the fact that there is no obligation other than what we already have.
Okay, so I think we're
As
talking,
slam dunk as you can get.
right, I think we're talking in circles, so let me summarize where we are. We can approve this, keep the option open, work with the state. There's no cost to the town other than time. The state is providing free consulting. In the meantime, we would still be eligible for these grants. In 2 years, if we find from a town perspective that the Commonwealth is still being inflexible, that we cannot work within the parameters that are set up, town meeting can decide whether or not they want to designate these 7 acres of highly dense building lots. So I am going, and you can pull out at any time. There's no obligation other than to work with the state to learn more about the program. So with that said, I'm going to move to approve the Dover Planning Board submission of an action plan to the Department of Housing and Community Development. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
I'm a no. Bob Springett.
John Jeffries, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So
And Carol, just so I was thinking about this. Do you know the closest, largest area of land to the MBTA is number 2 Cross Street?
But you're right next to the rail bed.
You have way more land. You have enough acreage. I don't have enough acreage.
Again, when you read the devil's in the details. So if you read through the whole thing, you will note that it doesn't have to be open land. It doesn't have to be undeveloped land, right? It could be land that's already there. We can include Red Robin.
I don't want to have, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what Robin's saying, and we have our options open, and I'm absolutely, no obligation is what gets my vote. What I am afraid of is the Carol Lisbons who own large parcels of land who say, I don't want any part of this ever.
well, then, John, it goes to town meeting and
Yeah,
citizens of Dover.
I get that, but it's just, I don't want to start a ball rolling. And anyways, let's not rehash it, but that's my fear.
The one thing that the planning board has not addressed, because it's not in our purview to address, is a question for our state rep and state senator on if there is a viable process to get ourselves delisted. And I urge you guys as the executives of the town of Dover to pursue that question.
I think that question, Carol, is best directed to our state and our state representative and our state senator and the people who actually have the voting authority, literally around that authority.
That's what I just said.
Yeah. Got it.
All right, so I'm going to move on, and Carol, I guess we can't get enough of you today. Item 1.2 is you as well. It is the recycling committee's discussion regarding increases in mattress and box spring pickup prices and a potential vote.
I thought both of these are slam dunk, so let's hope I'm right 50% of the time.
Okay.
I think the email explains the history of the mattress recycling in Massachusetts. They have officially banned mattresses and box springs from trash effective November 1st of 2022. We had already implemented a recycling program based upon a grant that the recycling committee had received 2 years ago. That grant expired in early 2022. Based upon the vendor fees that the transfer station folks had negotiated, we had set a fee of $15, which covered our cost, the town's cost, for pickup of these recycled units. I think the market economy has taken its toll on this. So now that it's banned, vendors are being inundated with a request from the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts to pick up. Obviously, there have been increased costs with fuel and labor and everything else as well. So Kevin McCabe informed us a week or two ago that the fee had gone up. And based upon that, the recycling committee is suggesting that we increase the fee so that the recycling is not impacting the transfer station operating budget.
Right, so basically, we're just passing the fee that the town of Dover incurs onto the users, where we never have subsidized this fee, and this is just passing off the price increase that we have.
Right.
Are there any questions?
So is there, how difficult, is there a convenience aspect to having this done at the transfer station? So if people didn't have it at the transfer station, what kind of effort would it be to dispose of mattresses and box springs?
Well, so
Painful.
it's painful, exactly. You would either have to, every time you're getting it used to be that you'd get mattresses and they'd be delivered by Jordan's Furniture or Bloomingdale's or Macy's or whatever. And and they always gave you the option of paying a little bit extra money to take the old mattress when they delivered the new. So there's still that capability. There are a lot of mattresses now that actually come rolled up and shipped in just a big box and it pops up. Okay. So you don't have a delivery service that you can rely on to take away as well. Anecdotally, a lot of the towns in our little, not so little, in our email chat group, if you will, for recycling committees in Massachusetts, have talked about over the years, the appearance of mattresses and box springs thrown on the side of the road, thrown in woods, and so forth and so on, because people don't know how to get rid of them. There's also, to the philosophical approach, Bob, Dover has been a leader and has been incredibly well respected by the state for its recycling programs. And we made the decision when we applied for the grant several years ago that this was something that we wanted to offer, not only to help our citizens respond to responsible recycling, but just to make it easier as well, and to meet the needs of a general commitment to recycling. So my guess would be that if we chose to cancel after 4 years our mattress and box spring recycling program, that we would find them littered around the streets. That's just my guess, my own personal opinion.
Yeah, no, it's not a question of that. It's a question of I think that when this came up, whenever it was, a year or two ago, we're talking about price. And so you want to have a price that's high enough to offset costs. And you want to have a price that's low enough to encourage people to use the facility. That was sort of my where I was going with it.
People
are looking at the
gonna have
data,
to
it looks
pay.
like we're sort of right in the sweet spot.
Well, we're covering our costs, and I don't know what the removal charges are of various vendors that are delivering mattresses, but I can't imagine that they're much different than this. And,
Right, and
they don't have a choice.
Right, and I know from getting rid of refrigerators because of the Freon, you drive around to a lot of different drop-off, and then you pay for them to take your old refrigerator if you're not getting a new refrigerator and the appliance person won't take your old one. So it's the same thing. You're going to pay regardless.
Yeah.
This is just a huge convenience because it's right down the street.
I just think it should be more. I think we're underpricing it.
Well, we're
Well, that was
just
my
trying to
point
cover
too,
our
John.
costs.
We're covering our costs.
Yeah,
So
but there is a convenience element to it, right? That's what I was trying to get at. John hit it right on the head. So we there actually should be a premium because of the, but you have to fit it between high enough to cover costs and low enough to encourage use, right? And so I wanted to get some background on that.
Well, our philosophy has always been just to cover our costs. We could think about other things, and right now our prices are going up.
Thank you.
I am going to move to approve the request of the recycling committee and the Department of Public Works Director to increase the mattress and box spring drop-off rates from $15 per unit to $45 per unit effective February 1st, 2023, which actually coincides with the increase we're gonna have from the vendor. Second. Would anybody like to second that?
I did it.
Bob did.
All in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
Hi, John Jeffries.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much.
The next item of business here is item 1.3, and that's just to review the town meeting warrant articles. And Carl Valenti is going to take the lead on this. In our packet, there is a summary of the 2023 annual town meeting warrant articles. And I believe there was a meeting early last week just to talk a little bit about town meeting. And because there is concern about the number of warrant articles that we have. So Carl, do you want to take it?
Good, thank you, Madam Chair. So just two things I want to point out on this list. So it looks very similar to what you reviewed at your last meeting. The one change is item 32, a proposal to amend the general bylaws regarding personnel rules and regulations and the town administrator's authority. And this is something Mr. Springett asked that we put in there before the board to consider. So I'll let him speak to that. And let me just make one other comment regarding item 17, which you've seen before. This is Park and Rec Commission request to put an article on regarding the Carroll Community Center project, as assuming that goes forward. And we've had a fair amount of discussion whether this is the appropriate town meeting for that to appear, or if that one should really wait until the June 3rd special town meeting regarding Carroll. So Park and Rec hasn't withdrawn it at this point, but I think there's a fairly good chance that that one can and should be deferred until the June 3rd special town meeting.
I'm really glad you said that, because I was looking through this before and that was my exact thought. We have no idea what the outcome of the town meeting is going to be. So how can you vote on this when you don't know what the outcome for the community center is? It just doesn't make any sense. They should be at the same meeting.
Yes. And I'll let Mr. Springett speak to item 32 and whether that one should go forward as well.
Thanks, Carl. Robin, you made some, I just want to backtrack a little bit. We do have a town meeting prep group and made up of all the usual suspects. And there is a great deal of concern about whether or not 30 plus warrant articles can be handled at a town meeting, one town meeting. And so that group, so they were looking at two things: articles that may or should be moved to a different meeting, and the one that the Park and Rec item seems to be out of alignment with the intent to have a special town meeting in June. And then the second part, and a lot of a conversation was wrapped around, are there ways of taking these items and breaking them up into two meetings? And if you did that, how would, which ones would go first and which ones would go second? And that was a pretty active discussion. And again, it was just a fair amount of concern about, from a planning perspective, what should we do? And I think we have a meeting next week to sort of continue to work on that set of questions. Item 32, I asked Carl to put this in as a placeholder. And it was really because we have been talking about amending our general bylaws around personnel for quite a while. And it seemed to be an issue that we as a board thought was really important. That as we've revised compensation, as we've looked at a whole host of things around personnel, and we understanding the general obligation to provide, sort of consistent performance assessments and evaluations, et cetera, it would make better sense to have supervision that was there on a daily basis rather than have personnel supervision that was done by elected board and commissions who only meet or only around on a infrequent basis. So I understand that this would be a big change and require a great deal of communication to the various boards and commissions and committees, the town, et cetera, But ultimately, I think it's something that we as a town need to do to comply with state law, to just good management practice. And I thought that the easier way to sort of refocus some attention on this was to put it up and have a discussion today. So it's more of a reminder of things that we think are important that need to get done. And I just want to make sure that that's true. And if those things are true, then I think we need to move in a way that we do the work necessary to have this bylaw amended in the future. That was it.
Yeah, well, I do not support putting this on the warrant. I do agree. We talked about doing the work, but this can't be done just by the Board of Selectmen on their own saying this has to get done. We need to talk to the boards and committees that this would impact. Just to clarify one of your statements, we do everything in accordance with our bylaws. Nothing we do is not in accordance with the bylaws. So we're not doing anything that is out of the ordinary. There are other communities that do have independent boards that have individuals that report to those boards. The question is this still the most efficient way to do business or not? And
Yes.
It's the month of January now. We have a lot of things on our plate, and I certainly am not ready to work on this or to present this to town meeting.
Yeah, I did say that it wasn't for this. I did say it was a placeholder, right, for
Yeah.
discussion.
Right.
Did I intimate that we were doing something that wasn't according to our bylaws?
I don't think so.
You said we were doing, I don't think you used the word illegal, but it was something like that. We're just operating in accordance with our bylaws.
Right,
But
right. So
we need
that's the
to-
whole point of changing the bylaws. Right? I mean, I just want to be careful here. We're operating under our current bylaws. We as a Board of Selectmen think that having this arrangement is not in the best interest of the town. And we're looking to change the way that the bylaw is written so it moves to a different model, right?
Right, but we
Okay.
also, as a Board of Selectmen, are not going to make this decision in a vacuum. And we will
Correct.
include those committees, and we're not going to bring something to town meeting without having discussion and education to both the town and those committees.
Correct again. But you got to tee it up at some point. John?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something we definitely should look at, because what we have learned from over the past couple of years with when we seek to make changes, seek to replace people who are in under our umbrella, under the guidance of the Board of Selectmen, that it's been difficult when you're responsible for the budget part of the employee, but you're not responsible for the appointment and for hiring that individual employee. So this should be something we should address. I think it's easy to address, but it's not, as Robin said, it's probably not something we can do because we just don't have the bandwidth to do it between now and this town meeting. I'd like to keep it as a placeholder. We have 2 more town meetings to address things like this year. So I just like
John,
the
John,
parking.
I don't support, those 2 town meetings are for 2 very distinct items. And
Right.
I don't support having another article in those. I mean, those are. special
We
town meetings.
know, I agree with you, Robin, but the fact of the matter is, at a town meeting, a person can stand up and present a warrant at a town meeting.
They certainly can.
So we have to be mindful that anybody can present a warrant at a town meeting. And while I agree with you that we don't have the bandwidth for this at this time, I also completely agree that we should be addressing this.
Right, and John, I don't know what individual would, have this as a warrant. This is an operating issue that we need to work with the committees on.
So what are you proposing for, do we even need to take action on the item? We can leave it as a placeholder. We could take no action. It doesn't necessarily qualify us, that we don't have to disqualify this or qualify it. We can leave it and keep it as a placeholder.
Or we could withdraw, I'll withdraw it. I just want to have the discussion and make sure that this is important to the Board of Selectmen and that we move on it. Now, I agree that right now our plate is relatively full, but these things just get lost.
I agree.
Dave has his hand up, Robin.
Dave, I will recognize you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Just very quickly, Bob has helped facilitate this, so we got to give him credit. And that is we're looking at town meetings. We're looking very hard at process.
Right.
And what our little subgroup has come up with is that the warrant is still the responsibility of the selectmen. And you all set the warrant, you sign the warrant, you set it forth. And then the moderator, his job or her job is to make sure that the meeting goes as smoothly as possible, as inclusive as with the
Right.
point I'm trying to make. But as we look through at this, and Bob looks at us and says, "Okay, you've got to pull off town meeting and do it in 3 hours because we don't want to stay too late." And then Jim and I look down and say, "There are laws of physics and time that'll apply here," and we're just trying to get it down. So Bob, if you could just let the group know that, pulling 32, and if we move 17, we begin to edge towards the possibility of Jim pulling this off in a manner that everybody will appreciate. So I know that Carol has one zoning bylaw, and it's doubled because we don't know whether it's going to be majority or 2/3 required on it. So that actually lowers it by one more. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carol. I'm sorry.
So if I may, so I wasn't
You may.
part of last week's meeting. I have been invited to next week's meeting on this. And I'm not going to preempt that meeting, but I think that we can remove one item, which currently is part of 4 articles. So we will need to do the floodplain overlay district, to your point, because we have to have it done by July 1st for state reasons. And we have to do the accessory dwelling unit because we've been trying for the last 3 years to do it. But the village center can be moved, and we can talk about it more on Thursday. I would also say that Article 25, the stormwater bylaw, which the planning board and town planner just got to look at this week, is certainly nowhere near ready for town meeting, and nowhere near ready for approval and support by the planning board. So I know that there's a meeting on the 31st, I think, of January, of the consultant and Kevin and our interim town planner, and I think Concom as well, to discuss it. So if they can get it redone for town meeting in May, that's great. I don't know if there's any timeline legal reason, like the floodplain bylaw, that it has to be done now. I'll leave that to those who are involved in it. But right now, I would sort of put that article in the possibility to move category as well, just from a standpoint that it may not be completed acceptably to the other boards and commissions involved with it. So that might be one to go as well.
Yes, well, again, sorry, Robin, I didn't mean to recognize Carol, but we're all working together here to make the town meeting experience as expeditious and as welcoming as possible. But they're just, what we're running into, as I said, are some laws of time and physics. So if everyone can keep that in mind as these warrants come forth, and then after we get a better handle on the number of warrants, then the discussion of the order will come in, because if this does spill over to 2 nights, then there's the worry about reconsideration of the previous night on articles and so on and so forth. So we're working hard on it, and hopefully we'll all be on the same page after next week's meeting.
Right, and it sounds as though there's already some compromise to help move things along.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone is being most cooperative. It's just sometimes you just look at a whole list like this and you go, whoa. So we're making sure it's got a good potential.
Sometimes, Dave, I don't know anybody that looked at this warrant list that didn't say, whoa.
You got me. Okay, I will let you keep going. Thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and appreciate what you and Bob and Jim are doing to try and make this more efficient. So Carl, like, is there any action on our part for this?
So there's no action at this meeting. If I'm interpreting your conversation correctly, I can withdraw or take 32 off the list. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, no, my objective was achieved. Thank you all very much.
And so for your next meeting, we'll ask the board, based on what's left on the list,
Right.
to just look at the order again of the items on the list, and then to confirm and vote that order of articles, because that will be instructive as staff then drafts the warrant for your mid-February meeting. So your meeting in January 31st, we'll ask you to confirm the order of the list, and then your meeting on, I think it's now February 16th, you'll actually be voting the warrant.
Okay, sounds good.
So Robin, just one thing. So the people working on the town meeting prep are, Jim, Dave, Felicia, Carl, myself, Barry, and Cam from warrant. So we're trying to get 360 view on this and all the players together.
No, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because we're also, the way this budget is pulling together, it's going to be a very difficult year, and there's going to be a lot of decisions we need to make even before we get to town meeting, to try and make town meeting efficient.
Agree.
All right, well, appreciate all the work. So the next item of business here is to review and the request for proposals from the executive recruiting service firms and a potential vote. As everybody knows, our town administrator, Chris Dwelly, left at the beginning of January. And in connection, and we now have an interim town administrator, Carl Valente, filling the role. We do need to have a permanent person in place. And just like what we did when we brought Chris on, we are going to use an executive recruitment firm. Over at the end of December, the board met with 2 firms. We met with Community Paradigm Associates and Government HR. Also, before I continue, I would like to say that Carl is recusing himself from this discussion because he has been consulting for Community Paradigm since 2021. They have much more than just a recruiting practice. They also have consulting services, which Carl has worked with them providing services to towns. So this discussion will just be amongst the 3 of us. So we did have meetings that were public with these 2 groups. We met with Community Paradigm and Government HR, which was great that we were able to do that because we were able to have conversations with each of the firms about the process they use, about the various towns that they have provided this particular service for. In my opinion, both of the groups were very impressive. It was very, they were great conversations. It was good to meet with them. And now today in front of us are 2 proposals from each of the group that respond to our request for service. So, I thought what we could do is just talk about the proposals, talk about the 2 groups, and then move forward with a vote. So, Bob, do you have any comments?
I think you covered it all pretty well. My recollection of our interviews with the 2 firms, we sort of had one of the firms, I think it was GovHR, had, I think they were based in Illinois, and
Right.
that they had a fairly extensive, broad reach across the country, and that Community Paradigm is somebody who's closer to Massachusetts, and we have worked with them, I think, on a number of issues, and I think they know Dover very well, so it really, both firms are impressive. Both firms have great reps and experience, and I mean, ultimately you got to come down between one or the other. So yeah, I think to me would be a decision for us between a firm with broader reach, one with local touch. So, but terrific firms either way.
Right. I mean, just because we do need to mention this, the costs for each firm. So the recruiting, the cost for Community Paradigm was $12,500. While the cost for Gov HR was $14,500.
Yep.
But I think at the end of the day, it's important to look at both firms and the quality of service that they could provide to the town of Dover. And to me, the big value add to Community Paradigm was the fact that they know this town. They've worked with the town, they know the people. And to me, that was a huge benefit.
Can I add something to that, Robin?
Yes, John, I was gonna ask you if you have any comments.
They know the culture of the town.
Right.
Which is a very big difference. So you can take a town of relative size to Dover and you could put it in Western Massachusetts. It's very different. You take a town of Dover size and you put it on the South Shore of Massachusetts. It's very different. And what I was impressed by both organizations is they had their process down to a science. The gentleman who presented from HR was the former the town administrator in Westwood.
Right.
Without looking at a note, without looking at his presentation, he gave us absolutely by the day a incredibly thorough analysis. I even mentioned at the time, Robin, it kept you speechless for almost 20 minutes, which, thank you very much, Mona, I have never seen done before. It may never happen in the future. So he was really thorough in what he did. To Bob's point, they're a national company. He's the local representative. So I felt very, very good with that, very comfortable. What he also said was, if we pick them, he will be the guy. It will be him representing the global company, which I really liked. And I felt very good about that. What I then juxtaposed Community Paradigm to his presentation. Community Paradigm, you get a bigger, deeper bench, that more people that you will have working on Dover, in Dover, that understands the culture of Dover. For Mike, that doesn't in any way disparage him or his presentation or his people. I'm sure they have a lot of people and they can staff people, but those people are going to be from somewhere else. So that was, to me, a bit of a difference. Bob?
No, I think we all sort of coming around, sort of saying in very different ways, but essentially the same message. So I'm comfortable with what everybody sort of presented in terms of the evaluations of the two firms.
Right. I mean, to me, we also need to do this very quickly. We have a number of key staff positions that we need to fill, and, Community Paradigm has done many of these, and they've done many in the recent past, and their connections to Massachusetts, I think, might just help expedite this process a little bit, which will behoove us as well. So I think I get the sense that we all are in favor of moving forward with Community Paradigm. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Then I will move to authorize the interim town administrator to approve all documents submitted by Community Paradigm for executive recruitment services.
Second.
All in favor? I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springett.
John Jeffries.
Time is of the essence here, and we need to formulate a search committee, and we need to begin the process. And I don't think that we've talked about who on the board should head that up. And I'm not sure if that's something we need to vote on as well, so that we can move this process forward, because we really need to fill this position.
Is that something that we have to do right now in terms of determining which of the three of us become the liaison to this?
I don't think so. And we do have a meeting.
31st.
Right. So we could do that then.
So
we
maybe you could do
that up.
BOS to be announced later or something.
Yeah, I just would like Robin to have a little bit of time to think about that for a couple of reasons. Hale, the Hale process, the Hale task force. Bob is up to his elbows in the process of the town meeting, the town meeting presentations, where we've got the community center next steps, which we're going to hear about in a couple of minutes. We've got Robin doing negotiations with the union for the high school. I'm doing negotiations for the union with the police. I'm doing the Hale process. I think we're almost to the point where we're all in agreement on the 3 to 5 study. And then of course we've got all the budget items. So I'd like to really think through, give us all another couple of days, Robin, to think through how much bandwidth we have. And then what of these projects that are in front of us are going to be moved to a consultant or a consultant team, or to get some, we're going to talk about getting some help with these from the outside. I think that we'll have more clarity in a few more days as to how much outside help we're going to get to help all 3 of us with these various stages that we're in.
Okay, that
What do
makes
you-
sense. So why don't we include it as an agenda item on the 31st?
Right. Could I just make one more suggestion, Robin? Or could we send Mike Gillette from Westwood?
Yeah, I was gonna, right, no,
Thank you, and something to that effect. I was thoroughly impressed with Mike.
right. I was gonna ask Carl if he could do that for us.
I'll draft something for the chair.
Thank you. No, I completely agree. And, I hope to work with them in the future on another project because
Agreed.
they were very impressive. So the next item is the 1.5 review of the Board of Selectmen's 2022 town report and potential vote. And I'm sure Chris Dwelly is not listening today, but I do thank him very, very much for doing this on vacation after he left. It is, and not only doing it, but it was an excellent overview. He did a phenomenal job. So Carl, with that, I turn it over to you, although, maybe we should have given you credit for it.
Nope, it's, I think it was either Monday or Tuesday of Chris's vacation week before starting his new job that he sent me the email with this draft with just a few quick things that fill in the blanks on. So I know the board had reviewed this, and thank you for the edits you provided. Of course, it goes through one more edit. The town report committee editing team will also look at it. But if there's if there are any further edits, let me know and I'll make those and then send them off to the town report committee.
Can we just, for the record, refer to Bob's edits as the grumpy edits?
John, I gave Carl edits as well, but I sent them to him without bothering anybody else. So.
Exactly. We do ours under the cloak, under the cover of night. Bob sends him with a flaming arrow.
Well, I never liked anonymity.
I just didn't know if you were supposed to. So.
But Carl and I had a lot of fun with, should we be using 2022 or FY22? That's the most confusing bloody thing.
That's why I hate this report. And it's also not the fiscal year, it's the calendar. It's just like the most confusing thing.
So I'll make a note. So when we do planning, we set up, we have like a rolling set of plans don't start and end with either the fiscal year or the calendar year. So my preference on the town report is we just talk about the things that get done in the calendar year and don't do references to things like what the FY22 is or whatever. Because it's just not that cut and dry. I mean, things roll through calendar years. Anyway, it is confusing.
Well, I'm very happy that Carl pointed out the correct grammatical use of federal, because I can tell you that Sister Domitilla in 4th grade never covered that.
So what is it? Is it capital or is it?
Oh, it's not capital. It's not capital unless it's used as a proper noun. I can memorize things written very quickly, but as Carl pointed that out, it's not capitalized unless it's a proper noun.
That's why we have people who actually know what they're doing as opposed to me on the Board of Selectmen. I do think that Carl, I do also, Chris did a nice job. I mean, it really was a well done, laid out recap of what we did with the town in 2022.
But when people realize,
I appreciate that a great deal.
Exactly. When people realize the level of detail that our team goes into, it's almost impossible to bring it to their attention enough, but it is an extreme level of detail that we get to see as a finished product. And I think it just goes, oftentimes it's taken for granted. So thank you all.
All right, so then I move to approve the 2022 annual report of the Board of Selectmen as presented.
Second.
All in favor? I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springett.
Hi, John Jeffries.
Great. All right. Moving right along, we are moving to item 1.6, which is the Board of Selectmen updates. And Mona, if you could just add to the upcoming agenda, just to vote on and appoint the selectman who will be the point person for the town administrator search. That would be great. And from my perspective, I did have a meeting with the new chair of the Warren Committee, Melissa Herman, and we just talked about the Warren Committee process, their role, some of the things that they've been seeing in their preliminary view of the budget. We agreed that she and I would keep in touch, and if we saw anything that warranted maybe a joint meeting for both committees to discuss, that we would do that. One of the items we talked about was, given that Warren Committee's role is really advisory, they make recommendations, there seems to be some confusion with some budget presenters as to their authorization. So Melissa wanted to confirm that their role was just advisory, and I confirmed that. At their last meeting, the library board of trustees presented. They are looking for a potential classification change in some of their staff members. And I did talk a little bit to Carl, and I suggested that we ask them to come before the Board of Selectmen as well to discuss this request and the rationale for the request, because this is more of a policy sort of discussion. It does fall into the budget, but it's also ultimately a policy conversation. So Carl was going to reach out to the director and the trustees and have them attend one of our meetings. Also, the teachers' contract negotiations are heating up. We have our third meeting next week. We're still working through proposals. The final proposals are due by the union next week. And then it's really the meat of the negotiations. So we've been spending a lot of time going through comps, sorting through the proposals that we've gotten to date, looking at them as some are procedural in nature, others are financial, so that we can address things as one understanding how they impact the budgets. The schools are very concerned about their upcoming budgets. As I mentioned before, their out of district costs are going up by 14.9%. Their utility costs have gone up, transportation. I think we are really going to have a very challenging budget year when we finally pull everything together. And I was talking to the Sherborne Selectmen, and they're seeing the exact same thing. They expect to have a very challenging year as well. It's just there's a lot of asks, just operational cost increases, which everybody's viewing as some of them temporary, but we still need to understand how we're going to fit all this under the 2.5% umbrella that we have for increases.
Robin, the out of district, is that covered by the state in terms
Yeah,
of
there
reimbursement?
is circuit breaker, but not for all of it. And
Yeah.
we pre-fund.
Yeah, no, I know how we do it, but
Right.
I don't remember whether or not how much of that is
It's about
reimbursable by the state.
70%, right, Carl?
It was 35% in our days, but I think it's up 70 or something now.
Right.
But I
But
thought
I can get the number from Dawn.
Yeah, that's okay.
And that's just, right now, I don't know if there's additional out of district that's come on as well. The schools have done an excellent job in looking at the needs of the students and then setting up, expertise either at Dover or at Chickering or Pine Hill, which is better for these students because they're in their community. But it's still, it's just, I mean, our capital is 2.5 million over what we have available in the reserve. There's just a lot of asks. And so, and we still have the big unknown of the cost overruns in the community center.
Yep.
So, I just don't, we're certainly not going to be able to give all the asks this year. And looking at capital, we're looking at the same kind of numbers going out for the next 5 years. It's just the two schools were built very close together, and it's just these large capital replacements that
Maintenance, really, right?
right, but it still comes out of your capital budget that we knew was coming.
So it raises the question of large expenditures. You might have to borrow.
Right, but we also, Carol, it's a fine balance. How much debt do you want to add?
Yes.
Can you defer some of the stuff, which I'm sure you can. So it's just going to be an incredible balancing act that we really haven't had
In a very long time.
in a very long time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
absolutely.
With regard to the out of district stuff, Bob and Robin, you know that my wife is part of that team. She's somebody who does the assessments on a daily basis. So what they have done, which has helped quite a bit, is they regionalized some of those resources and some of the teams that work together at Chickering and Pine Hill to keep in district. We're just not immune to those types of things when students come along that need out of district placement, and it's mandated. In Westwood, as Robin has been speaking to the Sherburne folks, I've been speaking to the Westwood folks with regards to Hale, and the selectmen in Westwood were really shocked a couple of years ago, and last year in particular, when they had 5 brand new out of district placements in 1 year. And so that doesn't sound like a lot, even to a town like Westwood, which is much larger than Dover. It was a massive constraint on their budget. And as we all know, it's not a 1 year and done. It's a compounding effect for those students until they age out of the system. So
Yeah, was it 3 to 21?
Yep.
yes. So it's a massive financial burden for the town at a time when inflation is going up and well, inflation has gone up. And what is interesting about inflation, and we're all probably having that inflation conversation with our various unions, it is something that affects them right here, right now. And when we say to anybody, it's going to go down, what they say is, my gas is not going to go down tomorrow. My cost of groceries are not going to go down, next on this Friday or next Friday. They are looking at it. The employees are looking at it. We need this today to catch up with the cost of inflation today. So it's a very delicate balance.
The COVID disruption is with us for a couple of more years. It's just a hard time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're going on year 4.
Yeah, we're starting. Yeah.
Yeah. The pig going through the python, metaphorically, it's going to take longer financially than people think, and we might have severely overreacted to some of the things we did during COVID, and we're not going to see the results of that for looking back, maybe for another couple of years. We're going to have to live with the results of it for a couple of years.
It's local, it's national, it's global, the disruption.
Yeah. Robin, are you done with the teachers? Are you done with the update for the teachers?
Yeah, we are not. We are only starting the negotiation.
Yeah. Well, with regards to, I'm sorry.
So I'm done with my update.
Okay. With updates with regards to we had Carl and I had with the chief and our town council had our 4th meeting with the police union and the police, our patrolmen's representatives today. We had a very long meeting. It was very productive. It's our 4th meeting. It's the meeting where you get to the nitty gritty of everything, right? We're very, very close. The way I would categorize, and Carl, correct me please if you would use different words, but I would say we are at a very good position. We're very, very close to where everybody is going to have conversations. Our next meeting, I think, will be a very, very productive meeting. Carl, would you categorize it any other way?
No, I think that's good, John. We have sort of agreement in concept on a settlement, but now we have to put it in writing and bring it to both the selectmen, and the union has to bring it to their membership. So so hopefully at the board's next meeting, we'll be sharing with you what the bargaining teams are proposing.
So will this be done in executive session?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite good progress, though. No?
Yeah, that's great progress.
It really is. It really is. I call this meeting the handshake meeting. The first meeting is called the shouting meeting, where both sides scream at each other. The second meeting is where you come to some sort of reconciliation. The third is where you do bargaining, and the fourth is where you actually shake hands. So hopefully it follows that path, and it's hard. It's as you both have said, it's a difficult time, and we've got to be mindful of today. We've got to be mindful of all the people that this impacts, and we have to be financially responsible for all the people it's going to impact for a long time. Tough balance. That's my and Hale, the Hale part, Carl probably can give you a little bit more update. I had meetings with the trustees and with Rob Warren from the trustees with regards to the CR. 2 weeks ago, we had made great progress. The one takeaway as it pertains to us and something we're desperately going to need is DA Hayden told me specifically, told us, the board, they cannot be the point person for communication and publication. They can partner with us. They have a team that can help us, but they cannot be the point person. So we have to have a conversation from the standpoint of what our needs are, both for Hale and for the community center and for our communication, because we don't have anybody right now to do any communication. We've got, God bless her, Ruth Townsend is doing things for us at the community center level. She's doing things for us here, but we need a person and a team when we need them yesterday. So
Well, John, we always knew that they couldn't be the point people, but they were supposed to put a first draft together, which was critical to this. You know, I'm sure we could hire a temporary person to come in and do the distribution, but you know, we need to get a communication document out there sooner rather than later. I'd say we're kind of late already, you know, so we really need to look at something. And this, so, you know, when has trustees put anything together? When can we expect to get something? If they can't put something together, you know, perhaps we can hire a consultant to pull something together for us and then help push out the
Messaging.
yeah, whatever it is. But the most important thing is getting a document.
Yeah, it was Robin. I asked her point blank, can you do you have the staff personnel to spearhead this? And she said, no, we do not. We can partner with you, but we do not have that. The critical part before we can send something out is we have to have understanding with the conservation restriction, the actual language of the CR, which Carl met with Westwood, and they're making progress. Amy Moot and Open Space and all of our people and the Hale Task Force. I've been sending emails, speaking, talking, having meetings daily with those people. So we have a lot of momentum, Robin, and we have the people in the right places. We need, as we did with the community center, the document, the actual CR, and the frequently asked questions that people are going to need to know. We need to have that person. We need to hire that consultant person, make sure that they have a staff that they're equipped to be able to help us get all of these things done, because you're right, Robin, the clock is ticking on all of these things. So,
Right. I mean, the other thing is, I hate to say this, and I know none of you want to hear this, but without knowing what Westwood is going to do, I don't know how we can go to town meeting, because the first question that's going to be asked is, what's Westwood paying? What's Hale's deal with Westwood? So, you know, and that needs to be part of the communication as well.
part of that is the conservation restriction itself. I'll let Carl Valenti speak to his conversation with the Westwood people last week. My understanding, our view of it, Robin, and the many conversations I've had with the Westwood Board of Selectmen is that we're definitely ahead of where they are, specifically because they have a lot more moving parts as it pertains to Hale than we do. Every point of access into Hale comes from Westwood. So Westwood, just structurally and physically, has a lot more at stake in this CR than Dover does as it pertains to the financial impact on Westwood. Carl, can you speak to that portion of it in your conversation with Westwood?
Sure, and I think John was a good summary. So Westwood and Dover meeting with Hale and the trustees. Now it's almost every week. We have 3 meetings set up again weekly. And as Mr. Jeffries explained, the first key is getting the conservation restrictions identified, because you really can't start communications campaign until you know what you're communicating. So we're moving in earnest on that. I have town council who has reviewed the draft CR, provided a number of comments on the Dover CR, I should say. So we're working through those comments with Hale now, and we have a meeting later next week to continue to plow through those. Westwood is doing the same thing, as Mr. Jeffries pointed out. Theirs is a bit more complex, their CR, not only because that's where all the access is to Hale, but also the buildings on the property are largely, if not entirely, within Westwood, and the proposed additional building is in Westwood. So their CR is a bit more complex, but we're being kept informed on every step of what's going on because we're all at the table, which wasn't the case
Right.
last year. Westwood and Dover weren't at the table together, but now Chris Coleman, the town administrator, and I agreed that we were going to move together so that neither town was surprised about what was going on in the CR with the other town. So I think that has a pretty firm and focused path in terms of moving the CR forward. The second step, as Mr. Jeffries pointed out, is the communications plan. I expect to know by the end of this month a little bit more definition on what the trustees mean when they say they can be a partner with the 2 towns.
Yeah, I mean, what's the definition of that, right?
And so I posed that question at our last meeting after Mr. Jeffries brought this to my attention, what they were saying. So I posed that to the trustee representative at the last meeting, and he fully expected he'd be able to be much clearer and what that will mean and involve by, he thought, the end of January or early February. So I think I'll have something to report back to you, or Mr. Jeffries will, in the not too distant future. And then the third piece of this is the timing issue for both towns. And again, we've been talking about this jointly about, can we pull this off for the fall, which means not only having the CR done, which I think won't be a problem, but having the communications piece out there and working. We all know that you can't do the communications during, from mid-June to mid-September. That's sort of people just focus. So we're mindful of that for both towns. Not only we have to go to town meeting and not to speak for the board, but at least I was anticipating that this would require a debt exclusion vote to fund this.
Yeah, well, we definitely don't have the cash for it.
Right.
John's going to write a check, Robin. It's not a problem.
And Westwood is saying the same thing, that they will.
John's going to write a check?
No.
So, as we get in the not too distant future, I'll need to have a more of a conversation with the selectmen around the timing of not only a special town meeting, but then if it passes at a special town meeting, the follow-up debt exclusion to actually fund that appropriation for this to purchase the CR. And we've shared that again with both Hale and the trustees that discussion itself around timing is not an easy discussion. I mean, there's a lot of implications for how you do it. And, the two towns believe that the timing of each town acting needs to be in, fair proximity to one another. So, they know what our decisions and votes are, in a fairly close time frame to their making their own decisions and votes.
Right, but even before that, the town needs to understand what the value proposition is to the town. I mean, we could have questions that just can't be answered. But you still need to understand what the value proposition is, right?
Absolutely, and that's part of the probably most important part of the communications campaign is
Right.
explaining that in a way that we can,
Because I think like the one question you're gonna get, like for instance, one of the things in the presentation that I gave to the school committee about Dover's finances, I put there Dover, we have some unknown items such as the overruns in Carroll, the cost of hail, and one of the school committee members said, well, hail's never going to pass. I mean, why would I pay for that? I never used their facilities, and there's so much water there, you can't build anything. So, people are formulating their own opinions already. And sometimes it's hard to undo misinformation that people come up with. So, it is important. The flip side, it's important to understand what could hail look like if it got developed.
It would look like Medfield.
I mean, how would you develop it? How much of it is developable? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, if I, as part of the value proposition, I'd want to know that, because what's going to be the impact on our resources? So there are a lot of questions that you need to answer.
Yeah. Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
I think the takeaway just for that to put literally to put a point on that whole conversation is we need help immediately with somebody who can actually do the communication. Everybody who we would go to ask to do something, there's an empty office. We don't have a Chris, we don't have Kate, we don't have Dave. We got no.
Actually, John, you need someone with professional skills.
Yeah, exactly. We exactly. That's even to the next step, Bob. We need professional skills, and I don't mean to any disrespect to Carl and to Rick and the people who are doing the day-to-day interim things. But as everybody knows, they are literally working part-time for us. So we need a full-time professional to help us with this, to even do what Robin just said. Articulate what we don't know.
Yep.
These are the things we don't know.
Yep. So is it my turn?
It is.
It is.
All right. So I have a couple of 5 things, and I'm not quite sure what order to take them in. So I'm just going to I'm going to start with asking you, John, if my blurb on Hale Reservation in the in brief report, if that is adequate.
Yes.
It is.
Yes, it is.
And then I'm going to ask the other members of the board if the final draft that I've put together for the in brief piece, if you guys are okay with it.
I need to look at it one more time.
Okay. Ruth is in the UK, so it's not a problem. So if you
Yeah,
look
I mean,
at it
I
one
didn't,
time,
there was nothing that
stuck.
shouted out at me, but
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start, Carol. The bid qualification process is underway. Documents went out. They're supposed to be back in early February. They go through the reviewing the qualifications, and that whole process should be, it's on schedule, should be wrapped up by the end of February. I asked Mona, and so we had a meeting last week to go through this to get an update on where we are. And one of the ideas was, does the board want to have a presentation from the architect, the OPM, et cetera, showing where they came out with all of their work on incorporating the suggestions made back in November to
I
the
think it would be
design and
good.
building.
I think it would be good. I mean, because I think the community wants to know. So just as part of keeping the community abreast, and if the Board of Selectmen's meeting is part of that communication strategy, then yes.
Okay, so we're tight though. When we talked about this, when I talked about this with the OPM and Ford and the architects, they have a drop dead date of February 10th. Everything needs to be finalized by February 10th. I thought it would be a good idea if the building committee had an opportunity to hear the presentation that the OPM gave to us last week. Ford has that currently set up for February 1st. That would mean that we'd have to have a BOS. I think the right sequence is to have the building committee have a preview of the work of the OPM, et cetera. And then we would have to schedule maybe a special meeting between the 1st and the 10th, no later than the 9th, so that we could also get the briefing and use that opportunity to, sort of inform the public. So I'm assuming that you guys agree with that you would like that process to happen. Then I can drop it on Carl's and Mona's laps to sort of organize a date. Does that work? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Yes, I think it makes sense also, just provided it gives them enough time,
Yes, you have to. Yes.
right?
Okay. So the town meeting prep thing we talked about, I'm not gonna repeat that. And then we come to this issue that I have on my list about staffing, and it's going to parallel or augment some of the things that John had talked about. So when we had we've lost 3 key people in 6 months' time, Dave, Kate, and Chris. And so the first order of business, in my view, is always to make sure the boat's floating, and we're not taking on water, and we can make it to a safe harbor. And in that regard, we've hoodwinked a couple of very senior people to fill critical positions in the town administrator's office and the assistant town administrative position. And that stabilizes the vessel and gives us an opportunity to make it to port. Where we've lost significant ground is on IT. We're missing Dave, and that's a big miss. And we have, all of these sort of looking forward work is stopped. And I think that Chris and I had discussed any number of times that we need to, if we can't find people, then we need to find a consulting firm who could support us so that we are not dead in the water and that we continue to move forward. But I don't think that's the highest priority. I think the highest priority is on somebody to help us with communication. We're trying to pivot from a fairly traditional way of interfacing and communicating with the public. This idea, Ruth has this newsletter, or once you have newsletters that go out on a monthly basis, the newsletter requires content. Content is a pain in the to do on a consistent and regular basis. So trying to think about how we could do content, I came up with the idea of doing this in brief document, which is nothing more than sort of a monthly status update on critical things that the Board of Selectmen and the town of Dover are working on. This is the first inaugural in brief message. I cannot do that on a regular basis and don't see that as my job. I think, it supports the need to have somebody on board or a consultant or a consulting firm who can do as like a communication director who could do management and content. And if that person needs help, we can fill in the help with volunteers like Ruth, who's doing just a spectacular job. The second piece of what I think the Board of Selectmen, in terms of a communication strategy, is complementary. One is this in brief idea, and the other one is occasional in-depth articles. We did an in-depth article on hail that was, I thought, very well done. Robin, I think you've done an article or potential article on what's going on with Rail Trail. So I'd like you guys to think about those two things as ways that we, the Board of Selectmen, contribute to the town newsletter and continue to find ways of informing the residents about what's going on. So I have a list under the communications director, just for the sake of a title, a hired skilled consultant to work on hail, town meeting outreach, meet BOS monthly updates. Carol, we have all these initiatives going on that need to be articulately written up and inform the community. And I don't know any other way of going about it. When you have work that needs to be done, the smartest play is to hire somebody with the experience and background to do it, and let them go forward. It's the approach that we've taken consistently. We've hired a health agent the Board of Health has hired a health agent. The planning board, they wanted to have a town planner. You need somebody on board who can do the work in a sustainable way, and you're not just simply relying on volunteers. I don't know any other way to say it. So I completely agree with John. We need to move, and we need to move now. IT could wait a little bit, but that needs to be, that particular gap needs to be closed too, because we're just not, I'm waiting for a version 2 on the website. And I think that simply stopped when Dave left. And if it didn't stop when Dave left, it certainly stopped when Kate left. So I don't know what the obligation is with the vendor for the product, but it needs to be looked at. And I guess lastly, the 3 to 5 committee. So I just want to bring you guys up to speed on where I am on that. Following the conversations that we had, I guess, at the last meeting, Mona recontacted the members that we had appointed. There were 6 members: Kate Kennedy, Jim Dawley, Laverne Lovell, David Presses, Carol Ringel, and Mark Sarda, to make sure that they were continued interest in serving on the 3 to 5 committee. They all came back yes. I reached out and contacted Chris Bolin, Kirsten Dennison, Brooks Bernard, Les Gessmer, Lee Gessmer, Janet Greenwood, Adrian Hill, Judy Schultz, Amelia Slosberry, and Rich Forte, to talk to them about the committee and determine their interests and interest in staying with it. Janet Greenwood and Amelia Slosberry both sort of withdrew from that. And I think I thought that was my goal, was to make sure that everybody who had raised their hand received an interview. And I do have a nominee for the 7th position, if you'd like to go there.
I would, again, we need to move this along. So, I appreciate the effort that was taken. I think it would be great to get the committee to its first meeting.
Well, I would plan to have the first meeting in February, so you got a week.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Rob, let me just ask 2 things. Bob, the difference between, before I start with that, did you speak with John, the gentleman who was nominated, who I nominated from my list James's list and the last time we had this conversation? Did you?
No, I did not, because the objective was, I thought, for a Board of Selectmen to have spoken to the person, and I
Okay.
thought you covered it.
Okay, I did. Yeah, I covered him. So I just want to reiterate the disconnect between at the last meeting was the lists, the two lists, the people that we had put together for lists. I did not. The only people I spoke to were those 6 people, the 8 people that you already alluded to, Bob. So I just want to make that clear.
Yep. And
And I
John,
think- Right, and I think, Bob, what you did is you asked Mona to confirm with all the people that were already appointed that
Yes.
this was something they wanted to do.
yes,
And they all said yes, they were
Yes.
still in, they had the time. I think one hemmed and hard a little bit and then said, no, I'm good, I want to do it.
yes,
And then you contacted everybody else that hadn't been contacted. And
correct.
you were also able to locate Rick Forte, who we previously tried to contact but couldn't.
That's all correct.
So, I'm comfortable if you want to if you want to nominate somebody, John, if you want more discussion, if you want Bob to reach John, the other gentleman, then we can defer this till January 31st and just provide Bob with John's contact info.
Yeah, I think you should do that, Bob. It's the only person that is in limbo right now. The other people were never contacted. The other people were just literally, as I stated, names that I thought we were going to submit. So John's the only person right now that you have not spoken to, and he's the only person that has been contacted by the board who is in limbo. The other people,
Okay.
Is that
Send his info.
Do you think that that's fair? Or do both of you think that's fair?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Well, it will be as the auditors say, complete. They're always striving for completeness. So
Amen.
you can close the circle, Bob.
Amen.
Okay.
All right, so we'll do that. Thank you, Bob. And
No
Carl, so I have a hard stop at 2. So,
We're just coming to the end, right?
Yeah.
well, we have Carl's update.
Yeah, so I can be very brief. I was going to update you on Hale, which I've already done. And I'm actually just working off the project summary sheet that Chris Dwelly has used in the past, which I find worked well for me.
He
So-
did some things right.
You did a lot of things right. But anyway, and then the other one on the list, item 29, the telecommunications lease renewal, is, I think the board recalls, we have one more space on the cell tower. Our special counsel is within the next month, probably less than that, we'll have an RFP ready to go for that remaining space on the cell tower. We've already been contacted by one vendor who is interested in it, so it's looking forward to the RFP coming out.
A revenue item. That's great.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, that's moving along. Again, those were the only items I wanted to bring to your attention. If there's anything else on the list, I'd be happy to try to comment on them. As you know, I'm still getting my feet below me stabilized as I move into this role. But Chris prepared me well, and I've been communicating with him regularly on a lot of items that he's keeping me up to date on, or bringing me up to date on.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, there's a fair amount, right, Carl?
It's a busy place with, as you pointed out, Mr. Springett, with a lot of interim people filling roles at this point. So we're trying to get you real bodies back. And I'll just add one other quick thing, in terms of priorities for me. One of the higher ones is to fill the treasurer collector's role, which I expect to be one of the most challenging to fill. We've already been meeting internally about starting that recruitment, but that's going to be a key recruitment for us.
And the assistant, right?
And the assistant, yeah.
And the assistant, yeah, which will start right after. I want to get the treasurer collector one out, and then right after that, we'll start on the assistant town administrator position.
So can I just add one thing that ties together, Carl, what you just said and Bob's report on his updates. As you can see, I am sitting in my new study that I've recently completed in 17th century architecture with 1960s furnishings that are bulletproof, I'm pretty sure. So that's a joke for those of you watching at home. I want to say thank you to Mark Galoni, our Park and Rec director. So Bob, to your point, Carl and I are negotiating with the police. We look at our watches. Okay, we got to start the Board of Selectmen meeting. He goes to his office. I come here to my new study and looking at this 50-inch television with all the state-of-the-art electronics. Nobody knows how to turn it on. So we get our Park and Rec director to come in and set this up. Literally, he literally gives me the do this.
You could have called me. I could have come to do it.
Well, exactly. You've done it, Robin. Mark's done it. Dave. It's just but we don't have the person to call to even turn the television on.
Welcome to corporate America.
So
I do like the digs though, John.
thank you.
I like the pink walls, John.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I have 8 minutes, gentlemen, so I am going to move to item, the last
Consent
item
agenda.
of the agenda, and it's the consent agenda. So in the consent agenda is the following. Approval of 2023 special day liquor licenses for February 8th, 10th, 11th, 15th, and 18th. Notice how Valentine's Day is missing. It's the 14th. Approval of July 24th, July 27th, and August 2022 open session meeting.
August 18,
August 18. What did I say?
2022.
Oh. So I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor? I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springett.
Hi, John Jeffries.
And then I'm going to make the final motion, which is to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All in favor? I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springett.
Hi, John Jeffries.
Thank you all very much. Mona, Amy, Carl, thank you for staying late this Friday.
Have a great day and a good weekend.